Live. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, of which we do have a few classes today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are particularly excited today. We've got a really fantastic speaker, and I'll turn it over to him in just a second. But first, I want to note that we've got 5 classes joining us from across North America. So I'm going to give them a chance to say a little bit of a hello. We've got Miss Gagne's grade 5s in Algonquin in Illinois. Hi, guys. Hey, we've got Miss Ing's grade 9s in Calgary, Alberta. Hi, guys. Hey, we've got Miss Knight's grade 3s in Chicago and Illinois. Awesome, setting the bar for enthusiasm so far. We've got Miss Winning's grade 5, 6s in Barrie, Ontario. If they got their mic working, let's see. Hey. Welcome in, guys. And last but not least, right now, we've got Mr. Mann's grade 11s in Virginia Beach in Virginia. Let me get their mic. Hi, guys. The lowest pitch cheer of all time. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speakers. We are joined live in Pasadena, California by Ravi Prakash, and he is a systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the most storied and iconic labs in the entire world, responsible for a great deal of all the greatest advancements in space exploration over the last several decades. So as a systems engineer, he works to make sure that spacecraft are okay, that they work, they don't blow up, and he's particularly worked on some amazing missions to Mars. So I'm not going to spoil it. I'll turn it over to him to let him share all the cool stuff that he gets to do and how passionate he is about it. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Ravi, and take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. So I am at the Jet Propulsion Lab, as Jesse mentioned. Who has heard of JPL? Anyone? Raise of hands. Yeah, some of you. So we are a NASA center. We focus on robotic spaceflight. That means that we do spacecraft missions that deal with robots as opposed to humans. So whenever you hear of astronauts going to space, usually JPL is not involved. But when you hear of maybe rovers landing on Mars or us going to any other planet or even orbiting the Earth, a lot of those times it's JPL doing those missions. And I'll talk a little bit about what I do here, how I got here, and the other type of work we do at JPL. First, I would like to start off with a video that I love sharing that reminds me about how cool my job is at JPL, and it gives a good overview of the type of work we do. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get into it.
You're good to go.
What does JPL do?
It's the most unique place to work on Earth. Our charter is to do things no one's done before. We do what no one else even dares to dream about.
Imagination and innovation are crucial in being able to do the kind of work that we do.
Innovation comes from people, but it also, I think, comes from structure and from the environment. If you can provide people with the appropriate tools, the appropriate workspace, the appropriate environment, you're also going to get a higher innovation output.
One of the things that makes the JPL environment so special to work in is that even when you first walk on lab, it feels like a campus.
And you walk around, you hear people talking about their work.
What would be the best way to get a subsurface vehicle beneath the eyes of Europa? And you're thinking, those people aren't just talking about it because they saw it on a movie somewhere. It's because they're really trying to figure out how to do it.
JPL is an incredibly diverse place.
There's thousands of people here with big brains.
Planetary science, answering these big questions, you need chemists, physicists, astrophysicists, biologists, and then you need everyone on the engineering side to actually build the things that you need to answer the questions.
People know so much about so many different things that if I'm looking for an expert in a particular field, engineering or science related, I could probably find them at JPL. I don't have to pick up the phone, I just have to walk down the hallway. Science is all about asking questions, and engineering is all about finding solutions. And so it makes sense to marry these two things together and try and answer the biggest, toughest, most difficult questions we can come up with.
What does JPL do? JPL builds the tools for exploring space.
The boldness of my colleagues is inspirational. The scope of the questions that they want to answer and the courage with which they go about tackling these big questions.
The passion of the people, the drive, the enthusiasm, and just the intelligence, the intellect that people throw every day at every problem that comes across.
Given a very challenging problem, please do this thing that's never been done before, that we don't know what to expect, that there's a huge uncertainty involved with. Most people would be terrified by the problem. I think those are the problems that we salivate over.
We shouldn't do something because it's safe and easy. We shouldn't do the thing that everybody knows how to do. We should push the boundary, and even if that means we might fail, we might succeed too.
I've never met anybody here that says, well, it's too hard. We all sit down and we just start crunching the numbers and figuring out how to get it done.
It's a journey. It's not necessarily an end destination. It's the whole way in which you're getting there.
It's a very liberating kind of environment to be in because you don't have to be so afraid of mistakes.
To recognize that we're doing science inside the solar system, outside the solar system, science focused back on Earth.
Our missions have a goal of helping humans understand more about the universe, and I think that's pretty amazing.
JPL has enormous respect for a good idea. And if you have a good idea, this is the place to bring it to fruition.
JPL is a special place because it allows people to have careers that are only limited by their imagination.
Well, there certainly is this drive, I think, from the human race to go explore, and not everybody's involved directly with that effort. As the years go by when at JPL, it becomes very clear that it truly is a privilege to be here.
This lab is leaving a legacy for not just the country, but for the world. And someday, if we ever do find that exoplanet that has life on it, or encounter some other solar system outside of ours, this is a place that's going to do that.
Great, so that's just a video that shows a little bit about how awesome it is to work here. I truly remember and realize how lucky I am every time I see that video. I'm going to now talk a little bit about my journey here. So let's see, I started off in high school knowing for sure that I 100% wanted to be a doctor. My dad is a doctor, and I thought, okay, my whole life, that's what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school that I realized that, you know what, for me, I think my dad works too much. He works nights, he works weekends, he's always on call. And that's not for me. And so what can I do? And so I wasn't sure. And so I went into business school originally because I hadn't given much thought to any other career aside from being a doctor. And I couldn't even have told you what an engineer does. Even though I grew up just 30 minutes away from Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, I didn't even know what an engineer was. And so I went to business school and I instantly realized that I was missing math and science classes. And so then I thought, well, okay, so what types of careers might involve math and science? And I talked to some folks, and I remembered that every time I went to NASA, I was really excited, and I was like, okay, I want to be an astronaut. So I changed my major from business to aerospace engineering. I transferred schools to the University of Texas in Austin, majored in aerospace engineering, and it was one of the best decisions I made, switching my major, which I thought at the time was a really big deal because I would lose a year of college. I'd have to be there an extra year to make up for the year of business school I was in. And I thought that was such a big deal, but in hindsight, it was just a year that would change the entire trajectory of my life. And so I went into aerospace, loved it, realized how much I enjoyed doing math and science. And when you enjoy something, you end up working really hard to do well in it. From there, I went to grad school at Georgia Tech, and then I came to NASA. The top left picture is a picture of me next to a test model of the Curiosity rover. We do a lot of testing on Earth before we send it to Mars, and even now that it's on Mars, it's been there for several years, we continue to do testing to make sure we understand how it's going to work, and if we want to maybe try new software or try anything else different on the rover, we test it on Earth first, because if it goes wrong on Mars, it's really, really hard to fix. We can't send a mechanic over there to fix the rover, so we end up having to do lots of testing here on Earth. And so that's me next to a full-size model of the Curiosity rover in what we call our indoor Mars yard. It sort of simulates what Mars is like from the types of soil. We can even change the lighting to be similar to what it's like on Mars. After that mission, I actually left JPL for 3 years, and I went to go work for some nonprofits. And here I was terrified. I was like, okay, this is a career change. I want to go help people using my engineering background, but I really only know how to make, spacecraft work, and I don't know how to do anything else. And what I realized is the engineering process is the same no matter if you're trying to land a rover on Mars or if you're trying to build, a better planting device for farmers. And so I'll talk a little bit about that later in this talk, but it was a really great decision. I ended up coming back to JPL a few years ago, where I worked on the bottom right. You'll see me next to a scale model of the InSight lander, a full-scale model. This is a lander that landed on Mars just almost a year ago. It was just after Thanksgiving last year, and its purpose is to find out how Mars might have formed as a planet by putting a seismometer on Mars. And so this is going to measure how active Mars is. It's also going to be able to tell us if the core of Mars is liquid or solid, and lots of other things about the Mars, the geology of Mars. And then, of course, on the top of that, above that, is a picture of me next to my wonderful family. I have 2 young daughters and a lovely wife who support me very much in everything I do, and they love space, which is great. So here is a video I'm going to share about the Curiosity rover. So we landed this rover in a very unique way. So before this rover, the size rovers we had landed were about the size of your maybe desk at school. And this rover that we wanted to land was the size of a car. So a very different problem that we're trying to solve. And this rover was so big that we couldn't use previous landing methods. So we had to invent a whole new way. So what you're seeing here is we built the largest parachute we've ever flown on any other planet. It's, I think, 7 stories tall. We ended up devising this method called a sky crane, where we have this rocket backpack attached to our rover. It falls out of that shell. It puts the rover on Mars, and it flies away so that it won't fall on top of the rover. And then the rover can begin its mission. And so this was a really unique way. We weren't sure if it was going to work. It was very risky. But in order to land a rover this size, we had to try something that was new and never done before. And that's what's great about being an engineer and being at NASA, is that you're always designing something that no one has ever designed before. Because if they had, then they wouldn't need you to design it. And so we're really lucky that we can design these state-of-the-art things. And that rover is still on Mars, making great scientific discoveries all the time. We just discovered that Mars has more oxygen than we thought. And so we're trying to understand why. That puzzles a lot of the scientists. But yeah, it's really, really great, great information. The stuff that I'm working on now is a different mission. So that landed in 2012. The other lander I worked on landed just last year in 2018. And now this mission is called Psyche. We're going to an asteroid. And this mission is going to launch in 2022. It's going to take several years to get to the asteroid because it's beyond even Mars. It's in the asteroid belt that is between Mars and Jupiter. And this asteroid is really interesting to us. This asteroid is what we believe to be the only metal asteroid that's in our solar system. We think that this asteroid maybe used to be a planet, but we're not sure. If it did used to be a planet, one of the theories is that, and I'm going to walk you through this timeline here. That top left, number 1, is, okay, this thing used to be a planet, but then pow, it got hit by a asteroid or something really big. And so then that obliterated the planet. Now it's a swirling ball of just maybe, hot lava or whatever that core was. But eventually that will cool down, the gravity will bring it all together, and it'll solidify again. And those lines, those purple lines that you see, are a potential magnetic field. So if it's a planet, if it's made of metal like we think, then it's going to have some magnetic field to it. And so we're going to go to this asteroid. We're going to orbit it, and we're going to understand, does it have a magnetic field? We're going to understand what it's made out of, what minerals is it made out of, using a spectrometer. And we're going to try to find out, is it the core of what used to be a planet? And if it is, we can study that much more easily than we can study the core of our own planet, because our own planet's core is so far underground that it's hard to really get a good look at it. So this might be a free look at the core of a planet. Other stuff that we do at JPL, this is nothing that I worked on, but if we go beyond Mars, beyond the asteroid belt, we get to Jupiter. And right now we have a mission around Jupiter called Juno. This mission is understanding how gas giants like Jupiter formed. And it's just taking the most amazing pictures. I love sharing pictures from Juno because Jupiter is such a beautiful planet. You know, on the bottom left, you'll see the Great Red Spot. Maybe you've heard of it. It's a hurricane that's bigger than Earth. It's been going on as long as we've been able to make observations of Jupiter. And it does change in size. We think that it's getting smaller, and it just keeps circling the planet over and over and over. But just imagine that, you know, a hurricane bigger than Earth, and Jupiter actually has several hurricanes all over it all the time. And this one is just so interesting because it's so large and it's been going on for so long. And what's great about places like JPL is that when you get these images, we put them up on the website as soon as we get them from the spacecraft. So everyone in the world has the same chance to see this as everyone at JPL. So, you know, we don't see these pictures before anybody else. Anyone can see these at the same time we do. And it's part of what we love about our work because we get to share it with the public. The American public is what funds these missions. And we love to share what we do with everybody. Let's go beyond Jupiter now. There's to one of the moons called Europa. Europa is a moon of Jupiter. It's an icy planet. And what's really interesting about Europa is that because it's a ball of ice, that means that there is water there. And what we know from Earth is that when there's water, there's life. And so we think that Europa might be one of our best chances of finding life in our solar system. So we are designing a mission now that is going to land on Europa and do some sort of science. We haven't defined it exactly yet. It's still in the works. We're going to do something there to help us understand the composition of Europa, maybe how thick the ice is, maybe what sort of life might exist on Europa so that we can do more in-depth studies in the future. And so this is an animation that we have that's showing maybe what some mission might do in the future. And so what you're seeing here, I'm going to fast forward this a little bit, is a mission that it's going to land sort of in a similar way that the Mars rover video did that I showed you, except there's no atmosphere on Jupiter, so we don't need that parachute. But we do need rockets to slow down because we're coming in really fast. We slow down, we land this lander. Because Europa orbits Jupiter, there's a lot of radiation around Jupiter. And so radiation really affects our electronics and the ability for the spacecraft to survive. It's also really, really cold. And we're far away from the sun. And so power and radiation are some of the limiting factors for how long the spacecraft will live. And so its life will probably be on the order of a month or for a few months, rather than several years like our Mars missions end up being. And so this will just show you that, you know, one of the things that we might do on Europa is we might try to dig a little bit to understand and understand the soil, probably scrape off maybe the top layer so that we can get like an untouched layer, something that's been unscathed by the rocket plumes that we use to land or anything else. Another cool mission that NASA is doing, and this is one that actually JPL is not involved, but I think it's really fascinating. It's another one of my favorite places in our solar system, which is the moon Titan. Titan is a moon of Saturn. And so Titan is interesting because it has a lot of methane, and methane is carbon-based. And so what we know about life on Earth is that all life has some sort of carbon involved in it. So we think that Titan is another great place in our solar system that there might be some signs of life, maybe life in the past, maybe the potential for life in the future, or maybe even life presently. And so we are designing a mission right now with the Applied Physics Lab on the East Coast to send a helicopter there. And this helicopter is great because, you know, the whole time those rovers have been on Mars, they've been doing really great science, but they can only travel so far. They've only gone a handful of miles. These helicopters can go much further because they can fly over obstacles that something like a car would have a hard time with. And so this is just another great innovative way that's, you know, it has the potential for really high rewards, but it's also very risky. And so we are okay, especially when we don't have astronauts involved, we are okay taking a higher risk for a higher reward. So this mission, you know, maybe, you know, flying a helicopter on another planet is something we've never done before. Mars 2020, the next mission to Mars is actually trying something similar, sending a helicopter to Mars. it's something that's very risky, but it's also something that has a lot of potential for great scientific gain. Okay, so I've talked a lot about what JPL does outside of, in our solar system, other planets. A lot of what we do at NASA and at JPL is actually Earth-based as well. We want to understand our Earth more, as much, if not more, than any other planet in our solar system. And so we have sent a lot of satellites into space to help us understand climate change, understand how the oceans are, rising, how the temperatures are evolving all over our Earth, and how humans have impacted that. And so there's been a lot of great science that has come from these missions. We are continuing to do those missions. We are still designing more and more satellites to do those missions. And it's a great investment to understand how we can help Earth and humans better take care of our Earth. This is a cool video. So in addition to sending satellites around Earth, JPL also designs robots that can help us humans on Earth directly. So this is a robot that JPL designed that, let's say that there's a tsunami or an earthquake or something where buildings collapse. It's very risky for people to go in and into a building that might collapse on them in order to save people. And so what if we could design a robot that can go in there and remove dangerous debris and help save people's lives, or maybe turn off hazardous chemicals. And so JPL has worked on these robots to help, people on Earth, as well as maybe we could use this in some sort of space application in the future. So really, really cool stuff. One of the last things I wanted to talk about was, so I did leave JPL for a few years. I really loved, I love the work we do at JPL. I wanted to personally make a more direct contribution to helping lift people out of poverty. And so as I mentioned before, it was something that I was really not sure about if I had the ability, because, as an aerospace engineer, I can tell you how to land a rover on Mars. I can help you design a spacecraft to orbit an asteroid, but I couldn't have told you the first thing about what people need, for better medical care or better water or better sanitation. And so I joined a company in Northern California, a nonprofit, and from there, I learned that really their design process was very similar to the design process at NASA. It's the same process that you might use in school, where first you define a problem and you say, okay, what is the thing that I'm trying to solve? And that thing, while it sounds easy, is actually, like, defining the problem is actually very difficult, because if you get the problem wrong that you're trying to solve, if you don't understand that problem clearly, you will not come up with the right solution because you're not solving the right problem. And so it's very important that we spend a very good amount of time understanding what problem are we trying to solve. Then we brainstorm solutions. And this is where it's very important to make sure that you have a wide range of ideas. You allow maybe crazy ideas, because those are the ones that might help people think outside the box and come up with solutions that might not be very obvious. And those are often the ones that can innovate. Or, if we only thought inside the box, we would have never landed this car-sized rover on Mars, because we wouldn't have thought that it was credible, that it was a good idea to use this rocket backpack on a rover and just throw it out of a capsule. It is a crazy idea, absolutely. I think everyone that worked on that project will tell you, but it was just crazy enough to work. And so those types of ideas come from that encouraging really wild ideas. After you brainstorm ideas, you down select to a few that you really want to maybe do some design on, or just do a little further thinking on, and you prototype as fast as you can, as quickly as possible, and prototype could mean anything from, like, using the closest things near you, like pens and rubber bands and markers and paper, to doing 3D printing, using 3D printing, or building some sort of model, anything to help you just test some sort of part of the idea, because what you'll learn from any prototype is the parts that work well and the parts that might need improvement. So that helps you iterate faster, so you can come up with a solid design faster. You can come up with your final design faster. So at my nonprofit, which was called IDEO.org, we had a saying that was, fail quickly to succeed sooner. So the faster you fail, the sooner you fail, the faster you will succeed. And then after you prototype, you find out, what maybe designs you want to go forward with. you do more detailed design, you build the real thing, and you test it, and you test and you iterate. You keep redesigning and testing until you get it just good enough to where you can actually send it off. Our spacecraft that we send off are never perfect. We're always doing modifications. We're always doing, software updates. We're always tweaking things, but at some point it is good enough, and we have to just let it go and do its thing because, especially when you go to places that are like Mars or Jupiter, you have to wait for the planets to align. So if you miss your opportunity, you're gonna have to wait a few years before you can launch again. So we are really under really tight deadlines to do that. Back to this nonprofit work, I'll highlight some of the work I did. So I got to travel all around the world to really amazing places. I got to travel to remote places in India. I got to travel to Ethiopia, Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Kenya, all sorts of places that were just really, I met really amazing people. The coolest part was that no matter how remote I was, everyone had heard of NASA and thought it was really cool and really enjoyed the work that we do here. But I got to design things that made an impact in everyone's life. And so that was really, really nice. I ended up coming back to JPL because, I had some kids. We wanted to move back closer to where my wife is from, to be closer to her family. But it was really nice. And I still do help with some of that every now and then. Okay, back to NASA. And I did all say the other stuff before, just because not everyone on this video call maybe wants to work at NASA, but if you have this desire to be an engineer or to help people, there are many avenues to do that. And so I wanted to put that out there. Here's a cool website, eyes.nasa.gov. Ask your parents if you are not old enough to go on the internet by yourself, but it's a really great website that allows you to interact with our spacecraft. So you can go, I think you have to download a small application on your computer, but then it allows you to interact with the different spacecraft and see what they're doing, where they are in their solar system, some of the things that they've explored. When it came time for InSight to land on Mars, it was a really great way to view the landing. It's really interactive and really cool. So I encourage all of you to go to eyes.nasa.gov, or maybe, if your teachers have time, they can do some sort of demo. But that's it. I love to leave time for lots of questions. And so I'm going to ask Jesse to help coordinate that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ravi. That was fantastic. And for all the teachers, I will pass along that link and a bunch of others about JPL and NASA and Mars missions generally. So there's some really fantastic stuff that they have on the web. Let's dive in with questions, guys. I want to note, too, we've got a few groups watching on YouTube. So if you guys want to type in questions in your chat bar, just let me know where you're from, and I'll happily pass along as many as I can. But yeah, let's dive in. So Miss Gardney's class, you guys are going to kick us off, and let's turn to you. If you have a question to start, come on up. One of those post-its.
How long will it take to get to Mars?
Oh, good question. How long does it take to get to Mars? So, does anyone have a guess? Do you have a guess? Can I ask you, how long do you think it takes to get to Mars?
Yeah, what do you think?
Like 3 weeks?
3 weeks?
Like a month?
That's a good guess. Okay, so I'll start off by saying this. So, when Apollo astronauts went to the moon, it took them about 4 days. The moon is about 250,000 miles. I think, Jesse, maybe did I get miles or kilometers mixed up? I think it's miles.
I don't know.
I think it's miles. Okay.
I'll find
so
out.
Let's just say 250,000 miles. Mars is about 150 million miles away from Earth. I think it's about 250 million miles away from the sun. The journey we end up taking takes about 150 million miles. So it takes much longer than 3 weeks. And actually, depending on when we launch in the orbit of the planet, it will take between 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. This is part of the reason why a human mission to Mars is so complicated, because we have to have enough food and water and oxygen to keep people alive on a spaceship for 6 to 9 months all the way to Mars. Then they get to Mars and they need to be able to have, their supplies as well. And there's a lot of radiation in space during that trip. And so we have to protect these astronauts from radiation, give them all this food and supplies. And so it is really difficult from that perspective alone, not to mention the other technical difficulties of landing something so large that would land humans on Mars, of doing missions to Mars. And so that is one of the challenges. Did you check me, Jesse?
I did. So it's 250,000 miles, so about 400,000 kilometers, which just is a way of thinking about it for kids. If you went around the Earth at the equator, That's about 40,000 kilometers. It's about 10 times going around the Earth at its widest point to get to the moon. So Mars is way further. So great question. All right. Yeah, let's go to Miss Ing's class. Come on up, guys.
Come on up.
What was the hardest part about building the Mars rover?
The hardest part about building the Mars rover. So it did take a very large team. The team, over the course of the entire design life for this rover, over 1,000 people had something to do with it. And something that I love sharing is that the chief engineer for that mission, Rob Manning, he talked about the previous Mars rovers that used airbags to land. And he said how, every single person has to do their job perfectly right, because if they mess up, the smallest thing can make this whole mission fail. And so his story was about how we used airbags to land those rovers. And there was this company that could sew these airbags together. And it was little old ladies, and they usually sew things for other purposes, but they were sewing these airbags for us. And they were really excited because it's really, that was really cool to be part of this mission. And, it could have taken just a few wrong stitches on some of those airbags and we wouldn't have landed successfully. And so I think the hardest part for any mission that we have is just making sure that, everyone has to take such good care and dedication in their job, and coordinating that effort of, hundreds or thousands of people is just really, really difficult. Maybe some of the more technical challenges is maybe what you're going after too is, so I worked as part of the landing team, and for us, designing this rocket backpack system, which has never been done before, was really difficult because, we had to worry about maybe there's going to be a gust of wind, maybe the capsule and parachute are going to fall back on our rocket backpack and rover after we go away. Maybe we're going to be spinning around. I mean, it's hard to control ourselves. And so there were lots of little challenges that we had to deal with. We had lots of meetings where we just brainstormed, what are all the things that can go wrong? And we had to say, okay, what are all the things that can go wrong? What are the ones that we're going to try to tackle and do something about? And what are the ones that we might not try to do anything about just because, in this list of millions of things that can go wrong, we have to really prioritize the things that we care about.
Very cool. Awesome. I always love when that question gets brought up. All right, Ms. Knight's class, come on up, guys. Everyone's got their hand up.
So many questions.
What is your favorite planet?
Oh, can I ask you what your favorite planet is?
Adelina, what's your favorite planet?
My favorite planet is Saturn.
Oh, I love Saturn. Saturn's so great because of all the rings. I think, okay, this might be cheesy, but my favorite planet is Earth because it is amazing. All of us humans live on here and it's taken care of us for so long. Outside of Earth, I think my favorite planet is not a planet, it's a moon. And I will say my favorite moon is Europa, because I'm really excited that it is a ball of ice and there might be, in my wildest dreams, there's like ocean monsters living underneath that we might find and we'll be able to say, yes, there is life inside our solar system.
Very cool. For the student in Ms. Knight's class, I'll send along the best picture of Saturn ever taken from one of the coolest missions recently, so you can check that out too when we're done, okay? Because Saturn's awesome, but Earth is cool too. No, I'm a big fan of Earth. All right, let's go to Miss Winning's class. Come on up, guys. Push him out of the way. Yeah, there you go.
So what is it like being an aerospace engineer?
Oh, that is such a good question. What is it like being an aerospace engineer? Okay, so there's a lot of different types of engineers. My job is to help put the whole spacecraft together. So there's a lot of engineers. If you think of the spacecraft as a puzzle, a lot of engineers focus on one piece of the puzzle, and they do that piece really well. And my job is to understand and make sure that the whole puzzle fits together. So if someone makes a change in their piece of the puzzle, I have to say, okay, how does that affect the other pieces that touch that piece? And how does that ripple through the entire rest of the puzzle? So in my job, I often have to talk to other people and understand, what are you doing? What problems are you having? What changes are you making to help solve those problems? And I'll give you an example. Let's say on that Mars mission, we said, okay, we need to make the parachute a little bit bigger. Well, okay, that sounds great. Let's make it bigger. But wait, that's going to have a lot of ripple effects because now that you're going to have a heavier parachute. So now when you have a heavier parachute, you have to say, can I actually launch this bigger spacecraft, this heavier spacecraft? And then also you have a bigger parachute. So that means when you shoot out your parachute and deploy it, that means that you're going to put a bigger load on your spacecraft. Your spacecraft's going to get a bigger jerk, let's say, when you deploy your parachute. And so now your spacecraft has to be a little bit beefier in order to withstand that extra energy that it's going to have to take. And so there's all these little ripple effects that you have to think of as an aerospace engineer to make sure that your spacecraft is going to work. And so a lot of my day is going to a lot of meetings with a lot of really, really smart people and understanding what they're doing and understanding how that might affect our spacecraft.
Super cool. All right. Mr. Mann's class, come on up, guys, and yeah, go for it. Oh, there we go. Yes. Go for it. Yeah, you're good.
You're on. All right. So my name is David Lee. I attend the Math and Science Academy at Ocean. And my question is there a chance that a terrestrial rover can capsize by like an incline or maybe a dust storm? And if so, how can the rover reorder itself onto the terrain?
Oh, very interesting question. So, so this question is really about what do we design our rovers for? So our Curiosity rover, let's say, and I keep going back to this rover because it's the rover I'm most familiar with. And we are designing a rover that's very similar called the 2020 rover that I am not on, but so I'll talk about the Curiosity rover. We have some idea of what we think Mars is like as far as the atmosphere and the dust, but we are always surprised by Mars. Also, we know the limits of what we want to design to. So for the Curiosity rover, we said, okay, we can design it to go up to a 30-degree incline, which is actually really, really steep. I think when you drive on highways and you go on hills, those are like maybe like 10 degrees. If you try to do like 30 degrees, you'll be amazed at how steep that is. A lot of cars, I think, would struggle at 30 degrees. So we designed it to go 30 degrees on an incline, and we do lots of testing to make sure it can withstand that. And it's not easy. It's really difficult. Then we choose places on Mars. So we said we have all these satellites going around Mars. We call them orbiters, and they take lots of pictures of Mars. And they're high resolution. And so we can take a good guess at what we think the general slopes are in the areas that we want to land. And we choose a landing site based on the ones that we think are safe enough to land in. So we chose, for Curiosity rover, we chose a place called Gale Crater. This is a place that is a big crater. It has a mountain in there. So it sounds like maybe not a place you'd want to land a rover on because it sounds like it's really steep and it has this big caving in. But because of this really innovative landing method, we were able to land in a small enough area that we knew was safe. And so in this area, we knew that there was a low probability of really high slopes. And we had a general idea of the dust environment that we would see there. And this rover is nuclear powered, not solar powered like the other rovers have been. So we didn't have to worry as much about dust for energy, but there is dust worries for other reasons. But yeah, the short answer, sorry, that was a long answer. The short answer to your question is we basically design the rover and try to choose places on Mars so that we will not get to a place where our rover would maybe tip over for a high slope or anything else. But if that did happen, it does not have the ability to upright itself.
Okay, that's a bummer. Very cool and great question, guys. I just want to note for classes too, more of the grade 9, the grade 11s, but watch The Martian and read The Martian, because if you want like the ultimate ad for engineering, that's it. It's some super cool stuff.
I'm impressed by how accurate, I would say, a lot of the details in The Martian are.
Awesome. See, there you go, the ultimate affirmation. All right, I'm going to take a few questions from YouTube, Ravi. So we've got a group in Miss Walchuk's group, Cordis, Ontario, grade 6s, and they wanted to ask, do you program the movements of the rover before it lands, or do you control it when it's on Mars?
It's sort of a combination. So what we do is, before we land on Mars, we have a good idea of the types of things we want to do on Mars after landing. So like, we know that we want to drive, we know that we want to use the arm and scoop things. And so we test all those basic movements out. We don't know what path we want to take because our landing area, even though I said it's really small, it's actually like about a 6-mile circle. Like that's sort of the area that we can land in. Just to give you an idea, the other rovers, it was like 50 miles, 100 miles. Like that was the radius that we were talking about. This is a much tighter radius of 6 miles. So with that, we don't know where we're going to land. So we land, and then we take lots of pictures around to understand where we are. And then the scientists have meetings to say, okay, where should we go now on Mars? And they'll say, okay, we want to go here. They make a decision, we want to go here. The engineer's job is to say, okay, how do I get there? Or do I need to tell the scientist, sorry, it's actually too dangerous to go there. We need to try to go somewhere else. And so it's a nice conversation. I think the scientists understand that there's engineering constraints. The engineers understand that, you know, science is why we're there. And that's, you know, we need to do everything we can to get the right science. But then we chart our path there. The first time we do an activity on Mars, before we do something for the first time on Mars, we try to test it on Earth. Maybe we use it on the test rover that I showed you in that picture, maybe some other sort of test setup that we have, and then we do it on Mars. But you know, that rover's been there since 2012, and so since then we have a really good idea of what it can do. So we don't have to test every single movement now. So now what we do is we say, okay, we want you to go there, and we've actually added some artificial intelligence to where it can avoid small obstacles. And so it can chart its own path to certain locations. And if it gets confused or stuck, it'll stop and it'll say, I'll wait for, you know, ET phone home. I'll wait for my Earthlings to help me understand what to do. So it's a little bit of both.
Awesome. All right. So guys, we got about 9 minutes. I'm gonna take one question from YouTube and then go back through our live classes, get one question from all of you. So do send me a quick message if you have to leave for any reason in the next few, but yes, let's dive in with Miss Gray's class. So they're grade 5s in Glen, Pennsylvania, and they wanted to know, were there any special materials used in that robot that's meant to clean up these cool sites? Like, is there anything extra armor or extra cool stuff that they used to build it so that could go in?
So I'm not sure I understood the question.
No, so that the robot, like I guess it was the guys with the simian shirt on the back.
Oh yes, okay,
yes, that guy.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes, so that is a good question. That was a technology demonstrator that we were designing for the Department of Defense had a challenge of who can design robots to go into these places to do to help people to turn off maybe hazardous gases. So I don't know I wasn't on that mission, so I don't know the details of that specific robot, but my guess is that that robot that you saw in the video did not have any special armor. It was probably just, you know, ordinary metal. But if the government if they picked that robot up and wanted to design it for actual use in hazardous scenarios, maybe they would have to design it a little differently to accommodate maybe hazardous gases or things falling on top of it.
Very cool. All right. We're going to turn to Ms. Knight's class, which again, every student has their hand up, which is the best problem to have. Yeah, Ms. Knight, guys, come on up.
Okay, Alex, ask your question. Come on, so, back up a little bit. Back up.
Hey, Alex.
So is there like any water under the ground of any planets?
Yeah.
Ooh, is there water underneath the ground of any planet? So that is a really good question that all the scientists at NASA want to learn the answer to. So we have sent so many robots to Mars to answer that question of, is there water on Mars? We can finally say that yes, that there is water on Mars. We had a mission called Phoenix that went to the North Pole of Mars, and it found that there was some water on Mars. Then the Curiosity rover found additional evidence of water on Mars. So we know that Mars has water. There was a satellite that went around the moon that found that moon has some small amount of water. And we know that Europa has water. Now there's a question of, okay, now that there's water, is there life? And so that is a much harder question to answer. We don't know the answer to. We hope that when you all grow up to be great engineers or maybe astronauts, you can help us solve that problem.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to go to our older classes first and then go to the grade 5s after. So Mr. Mann's class, if you guys want to come up with a question, go for it.
There's your chance. All right, David.
Yes.
He's back. Yes. No, you're good, man.
You're unmuted.
All right,
Go.
what programming language is predominantly used for rovers?
That is a great question. So at NASA, we really value what we call heritage, which is another way of saying, if it worked before, do it again. So what we have used on previous missions, way back in the day, we used Fortran, which is maybe, I hope they don't teach you that anymore. Then we eventually transitioned from Fortran to C. And C tends to be the standard language that we use on our spacecraft now. We know that there are more advanced languages, there are maybe better languages to use now, but because C has worked, we can basically sort of copy paste a lot of code from previous missions into our current missions, modify it to be relevant for this particular mission. And we can say that, okay, a lot of it's been tested already, so it saves us a lot of time. But we use C, and that's why we use C.
Yeah. Thanks to the one student for asking 2 questions. Way to go, man.
Yes, I love that. I love
Awesome,
the enthusiasm.
All right, let's go to Ms. Ing's class. Come on up, guys. Go for it.
All right, Sean. Just right here.
Wait, I have a question. Is it like cold in that classroom? Like, why is everyone in hats? What's going on?
Yes, it's cold in Canada. All right.
So there was old evidence of Mars having water. Is there any evidence that we found what happened to the water or how it disappeared?
Really? Do we know what happened to the water on Mars? So there have been theories. You know, what's interesting about Mars is that Earth has this magnetic field that protects us from a lot of the sun's radiation. And on Mars, we don't really have that. And one of the theories is that possibly whatever stripped away this magnetic field from Mars, because Mars, we think, used to have one, whatever stripped it away might have also caused Mars to lose its water. It's a really good question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know that anyone knows the answer to for sure. But I think there's some good theories out there. I unfortunately don't know much about that.
That's fine. We love stumpable questions here. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why science continues.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, we'll wrap up with 2 more questions. So Miss Winning's class, if you want to come up, go for it.
Hey. How much did the Mars rover expedition cost?
Oh, this is actually one of my favorite questions. How much do these things cost? And in specific, I think you're wondering, how much did that Curiosity rover cost? So let me say that this mission cost $2 billion. That is a lot of money. And I will couch that by saying, so this mission started, it took 10 years or so to design. Then it took almost a year to get to Mars, and it's been on Mars for 6 years. And it's been, I think the cost of that is roughly $2 billion. Which, if you count every person in the US paying $20 over that entire time, you fund this mission. And so, you might spend $10 on a movie. And so we think that these types of, learning these types of things are better than a movie. It's a movie that the American people are it's worth seeing, right? That we get to learn about, is there life on Mars? We get to answer questions that people have wondered before, there were even spaceships. People have wondered, maybe since the dawn of time, are we alone in the universe? And so these missions are very expensive. We do take our job seriously, and we do appreciate that the American taxpayers are funding all of this work. And we love to explore and share our knowledge with you because of that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions too, and I love the analogy that it's 4/10 of 1 penny on the dollar. So, 1/1000 of all the budget in the United States goes towards all the rovers, all the astronauts, all the everything, and all the discoveries that we've made about the universe are all for that. And that's just one space agency of many around the world. So it's a really fantastic investment. I love the movie analogy too. All right, let's wrap up. Actually, Mr. Mann's class, I know you guys got to go, so thank you guys so much for being a part. It's fantastic. And again, I'll pass along all those links when we're done. But yeah, let's wrap up with Miss Gagne's class. Come on up, guys.
So I have a question. How did the hurricane start on Jupiter?
Oh, how did the hurricane start on Jupiter? So unfortunately, I have to end with a question that I don't know the answer to. So I think, I wouldn't be surprised if it's very similar to how hurricanes start on Earth, which is some combination of, just different pressures. There's Jupiter's, it's the largest planet. It has a lot of gravity, so it pulls in a lot of other planets, and maybe something about, gosh, I'm just making up stuff here, but it's probably related to maybe the magnetic field or the radiation or the pressures that caused all those hurricanes. I really don't know the answer. If you find out, can you let me know?
Will do. And I'll pass along a question you can answer before we go, because this is something we got on YouTube a bunch, and we actually haven't covered it in a Mars session, which is really odd. So what's the deal with going to Mars? For students today, do we have prototypes in the works? How are people excited? Like what's going to happen for going to Mars?
People going to Mars, right?
Yes, people.
Yeah. So NASA is, this is one of those things that it's something that we are very excited to do. We want to send people to Mars. It's been a long time since we sent people to the moon. And the next destination that makes sense is Mars. NASA would love to do this. It's one of those things that it does take, there's a lot of technical challenges that need to be solved. It also costs a lot of money. So, this rover was $2 billion, but sending people is several $billion. And so it's a very serious commitment that has to withstand several presidential elections, let's say. And so a lot of politicians have to make this a priority. And so it's been a priority in the past, and then it hasn't, and then it has and hasn't. And so what it needs is a lot of the public to support these sort of efforts for it to survive. I will say that there is a great chance that someone that is your age will be the first person to step foot on Mars. And so it is super exciting that, that you can be the trailblazer, you can be the Neil Armstrong of Mars, and that would just be the most amazing thing. I also do want to show you before we leave where I am, which is mission control. This is the room that we are in when we have big events like landing rovers on Mars, or when we had the Cassini mission did a big, they flew into Saturn on purpose because this mission was over and we didn't want to crash into one of the moons that might have life on it. And so any major event, it happens in this room, and you can think of yourself as part of history by having seen it.
And I will pass along the link to Insight Landing and the people getting so excited in that very room. It's one of the best videos ever. So when we're done, Ravi, this is fantastic as always. Thank you so much for joining us. And as you know, what we do at the end of every session. And so boys and girls, if you guys could get ready, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. And so if you guys could just join me in saying a huge thank you to Ravi for joining us today. You are all now demuted. Go for it. Thank you so much, guys. Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, so to all our classes, thanks so much for joining us. Ravi, that was fantastic.
Oh, I love it. Thanks everyone for your time.